I'm Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, and I never imagined my own parents would betray me like this. You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. Your sister owns that house now. Those cold words shattered 5 years of trust and rent payments. While Rachel always got everything handed to her, I believed hard work would eventually earn recognition. That devastating phone call changed everything, but they had no idea what their betrayal would ultimately unleash. Before I tell you how this all went down, take a second to let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with family betrayal, and let's dive into how this nightmare began. Growing up as the responsible older daughter in our upper-middle-class family in Connecticut wasn't easy. From the earliest days I can remember, the dynamic was clear. Rachel was the baby, the special one who needed protection and support, while I was expected to be self-sufficient. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Mitchell, never tried to hide their favoritism, though they'd vehemently deny it if confronted. Sarah is so independent, my mother would tell her friends with pride, as if my self-reliance at age 10 was some inherent personality trait rather than a necessary adaptation to their emotional neglect. Meanwhile, Rachel's smallest accomplishments were celebrated with parties and presents. Her mediocre report cards earned ice cream trips while my straight-A's were met with a perfunctory nod and an of course. This pattern continued through our teenage years. When college applications came around, I spent nights researching scholarships and financial aid options. I still remember the crushing disappointment when my parents casually mentioned over dinner that they couldn't contribute much to my education. "We have to think about Rachel's college fund too," my father explained, not meeting my eyes. "She'll need that safety net." I ended up attending State University on a partial scholarship, working 20 hours weekly at the campus library to cover the remaining costs. 3 years later, Rachel chose an expensive private art school in California. My parents remortgaged their house to fund her education fully, tuition, housing, and a generous monthly allowance. "Your sister is pursuing a creative field," my mother explained when I questioned the disparity. "She needs financial support to follow her dreams. You've always been the practical one." I threw myself into my accounting degree, graduating with honors and securing a position at a respected firm in Hartford. My practical career choice paid off, allowing me to build savings and establish financial independence. Meanwhile, Rachel bounced between various artistic pursuits in Los Angeles: photography, screenwriting, indie film production, none lasting longer than 6 months. My romantic life followed a similar pattern of self-reliance. After 2 serious relationships that ended when partners couldn't handle my independence, or as my friend Melissa bluntly put it, when they realized you wouldn't let them leech off you, I focused on building my career and creating a stable life for myself. The house that would become the center of this family drama belonged to my grandmother, my father's mother. A modest but charming 3-bedroom colonial in a tree-lined neighborhood just outside Hartford, it had been her home for 40 years. When Grandma Mitchell passed away 5 years ago, she left the property to my parents, though I distinctly remember conversations where she mentioned wanting both her granddaughters to benefit from her estate. At the time of her death, the house stood empty as my parents had no interest in moving from their larger home across town. After 3 months of watching the property sit vacant, I approached them with a proposal. I would live in Grandma's house, pay them fair market rent, maintain the property, and cover all repairs and updates. This arrangement could benefit everyone, I explained during Sunday dinner. The house stays in the family, you receive income from it, and I get to live in a place with meaning to us all. My father nodded thoughtfully. That makes good financial sense. My mother seemed relieved. I've been worried about the house sitting empty for so long. We formalized our agreement with a rental contract, though there was always an unspoken understanding, at least I thought there was, that eventually, the house would become mine. This belief was reinforced by occasional comments from my parents about when the house is yours and your future home. In one email exchange about a major plumbing repair, my father even wrote, "Go ahead and choose the fixtures you want since the house will one day be yours." For 5 years, I was the perfect tenant. I never missed a rent payment, maintained the property meticulously, and invested over $15,000 of my own money in improvements. updating the kitchen, refinishing the hardwood floors, and landscaping the neglected garden. I turned Grandma's house into my home, preserving the character she loved while adding my own touches. Everything seemed stable until 8 months ago when Rachel suddenly returned from Los Angeles, her Hollywood dreams apparently shattered. She moved back into our parents' house, claiming she needed time to recalibrate her artistic vision. From what I gathered during family dinners, her last film project had collapsed due to funding issues, leaving her emotionally devastated. "The industry is so brutal," she would lament, dabbing at non-existent tears. "No one understands what true artists go through." I noticed subtle changes in family dynamics following Rachel's return. My parents canceled our monthly dinners twice when Rachel needed emotional support. My mother stopped asking about my work promotions, instead filling our phone calls with updates on Rachel's new local art initiatives. When I completed a major kitchen renovation, my father's response was a distracted "that's nice," before turning the conversation to Rachel's plans to convert their garage into a photography studio. Still, nothing prepared me for what was coming. Looking back, there were warning signs I missed, hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, Rachel's increasingly proprietary comments about such a charming house, my mother asking for copies of all home improvement receipts for tax purposes. I was too trusting, too secure in our agreement to recognize the betrayal being orchestrated behind my back. The day that shattered my world began like any other Tuesday. I just finished a virtual meeting with clients when my phone rang, displaying my father's name. Assuming he was calling about our upcoming family dinner, I answered cheerfully. "Hi, Dad, what's up?" His voice came through unnaturally formal, the tone he typically reserved for difficult business conversations. "Sarah, your mother and I need to discuss something important with you regarding the house." An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. "What about the house?" "After careful consideration of everyone's needs, we've decided to transfer ownership of the property to Rachel." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "The deed has already been changed. Rachel is now the legal owner of the house." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "But I've been living here for 5 years. I've been paying rent. We had an agreement. You were a tenant, Sarah." His voice remained coldly businesslike. "We appreciated the rental income, but we never signed anything promising you ownership. But you said multiple times that eventually." He cut me off. "Casual comments aren't legally binding. Rachel needs stability after her setbacks in California. As the property owners, we made the decision we feel is best." I heard my mother's voice in the background, then she came on the line. "Sarah, honey, you're so established in your career. Rachel needs this fresh start. You understand, don't you?" Before I could respond, my father took the phone back. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. Your sister owns that house now." The finality in his voice left me speechless. 48 hours to vacate the home I'd lived in and loved for 5 years? The home where I'd hosted friends for dinner parties, planted perennial gardens, and created a peaceful sanctuary for myself? "This isn't right," I finally managed. "I've paid over $75,000 in rent over the years. I've put in another $15,000 in improvements. The new kitchen alone." "Tenants often make improvements to rental properties," my father interrupted. "That doesn't entitle them to ownership." "But I'm not just a tenant. I'm your daughter." My voice cracked as the betrayal cut deeper. "We had an understanding. You wrote in emails that the house would eventually be mine." "We never signed a contract to that effect," he replied, unmoved. "Rachel will be coming by tomorrow morning to assess the property. Please ensure your essential belongings are packed by Thursday evening." The call ended before I could form a coherent response. I sat at my desk, phone still clutched in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. Within minutes, a text from Rachel appeared on my screen. "So excited about my new house. Don't worry about deep cleaning before you go. I'll be renovating everything anyway. Your decorating style is so basic." The casual cruelty of her message sent me spiraling. My chest tightened as a full-blown panic attack took hold. 5 years of my life, thousands of dollars in rent and improvements, countless hours creating a home, all dismissed in a 45-second phone call. I called my parents back repeatedly, but they didn't answer. I left increasingly desperate voicemails, my composure crumbling with each one. Please, we need to discuss this properly. You can't just throw me out with no notice. There must be some misunderstanding. By evening, my messages had devolved into tearful pleas. Mom, Dad, please don't do this to me. That night was the longest of my life. I paced through the rooms of my home, no, not my home anymore, according to my parents, looking at everything I'd built, everything I stood to lose. The custom bookshelves I'd installed in the living room. The garden beds outside that would bloom with tulips I'd planted but might never see. The newly refinished hardwood floors that had taken me 3 weekends of backbreaking work. Sleep was impossible. Instead, I oscillated between numbness, disbelief, and waves of grief so intense they left me gasping. The betrayal wasn't just about the house, it was the confirmation of what I'd suspected but never wanted to believe. In my parents' eyes, Rachel's needs would always supersede mine. My feelings, my stability, my future, none of it mattered when weighed against Rachel's desires. By dawn, grief had hardened into something else. I sat at my kitchen counter, watching the sunrise through windows I'd restored myself, and felt worthless. If my own parents could discard me so easily, perhaps I deserved nothing better. Morning brought no clarity or relief. After a sleepless night, I made a decision. I would confront my parents face to face. Surely in person they would see the devastating impact of their decision. I called in sick to work, something I'd done only twice in 7 years, and drove to my parents' suburban home. My mother answered the door, her expression flickering between guilt and annoyance. "Sarah, we weren't expecting you. We need to talk about this. All of us." I stepped past her into the foyer, my voice steadier than I felt. In the living room, my father sat in his leather recliner, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. He looked up, unsurprised by my arrival. "I assume this is about the house." "Of course it's about the house," I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. "You can't just throw me out with 2 days' notice after 5 years. Technically, we're required to give you 30 days, he conceded. "But we thought a clean break would be better for everyone." Better for everyone? Or just better for Rachel? The words escaped before I could censor them. "Don't drag your sister into this," my mother interjected. "She's just accepting what we offered her." As if summoned by her name, Rachel appeared in the doorway, wearing silk pajamas at 11 in the morning. "Oh, family meeting without me?" Her mock surprise couldn't hide the smug satisfaction in her eyes. "Rachel, perhaps you should let us handle this," my mother suggested half-heartedly. "No, I think I should stay." Rachel settled onto the sofa, tucking her feet under her. "After all, we're discussing my house." The casual possessiveness in her voice made my stomach turn. "It's not your house. Not morally, not ethically. I've lived there for 5 years. I've taken care of it, improved it, made it a home. But legally, it is mine." Rachel's smile was syrupy sweet. "The deed has my name on it as of yesterday." I turned to my parents. "How could you do this?" "We had an agreement." "We had a rental agreement," my father corrected. "Nothing more." "That's not true, and you know it. You've said multiple times the house would eventually be mine." My father removed his glasses, his expression hardening. "Sarah, you're a practical person. You understand that verbal comments don't constitute a binding agreement. This isn't about legality. This is about fairness, about trust, about family." My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. "I've paid rent for 5 years. Where did that money go?" An uncomfortable silence fell. My mother busied herself straightening magazines on the coffee table. My father cleared his throat, but didn't answer. "It went in me," Rachel said quietly. "Well, some of it." "What?" I stared at her in disbelief. "My production company in LA needed investors. Mom and Dad helped." I turned to my parents, stunned. "You used my rent payments to fund Rachel's failed business?" "It wasn't a failure," Rachel snapped. "We had creative differences with our financiers." "That's irrelevant," my father interjected. "The rent was ours to use as we saw fit. We own the property." "Owned," Rachel corrected with a smirk. Past tense. Something in her tone made me pause. Why the sudden decision to transfer ownership now? After 5 years of me living there? Rachel and my parents exchanged glances. Rachel needs stability after her traumatic experience in Los Angeles, my mother explained. What traumatic experience? Her film project fell through. That's disappointing, but hardly traumatic. Rachel's eyes welled with tears on cue. You have no idea what I went through out there. The betrayal, the stress. I nearly had a breakdown. Rachel told us you were planning to sell the house, my father said abruptly. I stared at him in disbelief. Sell it? How could I sell a house I don't own? She said you were looking into adverse possession laws, my mother added. That you plan to claim ownership based on your time living there and improvements made. That's absurd. I stopped, seeing Rachel's momentary smirk behind my parents' backs. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She lied to you. Sarah, don't start this again, my father warned. Your constant competition with your sister needs to stop. Competition? This isn't about competition. This is about Rachel manipulating you and you believing her over me without even asking for my side. We never intended for you to own the house, my mother said softly, as if this admission might soften the blow. It was always a temporary arrangement. Then why did you repeatedly tell me otherwise? Why let me invest thousands in improvements? We appreciated your keeping the property maintained, my father replied. But Rachel needs the house more than you do. You're fine on your own. You have a good job savings. Rachel needs help establishing herself. At 32? After multiple failed careers that you've funded? When does Rachel start taking responsibility for herself? Rachel's tears disappeared instantly. Just because you chose a boring, soulless corporate job doesn't mean my artistic pursuits aren't valid career paths. Valid career paths that somehow always require our parents' financial support, I shot back. My mother stepped between us. Sarah, this decision is final. Rachel needs a fresh start, and the house is perfect for her. What about my fresh start? What about the life I've built there? You'll adapt, my father said dismissively. You always do. In that moment, I understood completely my self-sufficiency, my independence. Traits they'd praised throughout my childhood were now being used against me. I had never needed them enough, never shown the vulnerability that Rachel weaponized so effectively. So I'm being punished for not failing? My voice was barely audible. No one answered. In the silence, I saw the truth in their averted gazes. They had never intended for me to have the house. I had always been merely a caretaker, a source of income until Rachel wanted the property. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. I'll be out by Thursday evening. As I walked toward the door, Rachel called after me. Don't forget to leave the spare key under the mat. Outside, sitting in my car, the tears finally came. Not just for the house, but for the family I thought I had. The parents I believed, despite their flaws, would treat their children with some measure of equity. The illusion was shattered completely. My phone rang. Melissa, my best friend since college. How did it go? She asked, having heard about the situation last night. Worse than I imagined. My voice broke. They never intended for me to have the house. I was just maintaining it until Rachel wanted it. That's insane, Melissa said, outrage evident in her voice. Where are you supposed to go with 2 days' notice? I don't know, I admitted, the reality of my situation hitting me anew. You're coming to my place, she said without hesitation. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it. Her immediate support unleashed a fresh wave of tears. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is what family does, real family, not whatever twisted version yours is demonstrating. Now come over. We need to make a plan. As I drove to Melissa's house, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. My blood relatives had just betrayed me completely, while my chosen family was stepping up without hesitation. The wound was still raw, the injustice burning, but something inside me shifted slightly. This wasn't over. I wouldn't be discarded so easily. When I arrived at Melissa's apartment that afternoon, she had already transformed her guest room into a temporary sanctuary. Fresh sheets on the bed, space cleared in the closet, even my favorite tea waiting in the kitchen. It's not much, but it's yours as long as you need, she said, hugging me tightly. I don't know how to thank you, I whispered, overwhelmed by her kindness. You can thank me by not letting them get away with this, Melissa replied, fierce loyalty evident in her voice. But first, we need to get your stuff out of that house. The practical challenges of my situation came into sharp focus. How does one pack up 5 years of life in less than 48 hours? I called my office, extending my emergency leave to the rest of the week. My manager, hearing the strain in my voice, approved it without question. Family emergency, she asked sympathetically. Something like that, I replied, the irony bitter on my tongue. By evening, Melissa had mobilized our friend group. Jason arrived with his pickup truck and empty moving boxes. Coworkers from my firm showed up with packing supplies and takeout food. My neighbor Thomas, hearing about the situation, offered his garage for temporary storage. We worked through the night, prioritizing my most important possessions. My home office came first: professional documents, computer equipment, the ergonomic chair I'd invested in during the pandemic. Next came irreplaceable items, photo albums, the quilt my grandmother had made me, artwork collected over years of travel. What about the furniture? Jason asked as we collapsed on the couch for a brief rest. I looked around at the home I'd created. Most of the furniture I'd either purchased new or painstakingly restored from vintage finds. The dining table where I'd hosted countless dinner parties. The bookshelves I'd built myself. The antique sideboard I'd refinished over a full month of weekends. I don't have anywhere to put it all, I admitted, the reality crushing me anew. I can store some at my place, Jason offered. My parents have space in their basement, another friend suggested. But the logistics were overwhelming. Even with everyone's help, I couldn't possibly move and store everything I owned in the time allowed. Some painful decisions would have to be made. The next morning, as we continued packing, Rachel arrived unannounced. She walked through the front door without knocking, as if she already owned the place, which, legally, she did. Just checking on your progress, she announced, eyeing the stacked boxes with satisfaction. I'll need to start measuring for new curtains soon. I continued wrapping dishes in newspaper, not trusting myself to respond. Rachel wandered through the living room, running her fingers over furniture. I'm thinking of painting everything white. This dark wood is so depressing. Melissa stepped between us, her expression dangerous. Maybe you should come back after Sarah's moved out. I have every right to be here, Rachel replied coolly. This is my house now. A house you did nothing to earn, I said, finally looking up from my packing. A house you manipulated our parents to get. Rachel's facade slipped momentarily. Please. I just expedited the inevitable. They were never going to give you this house. You told them I was planning to claim ownership through adverse possession, I accused. You made up lies about me. She shrugged, unapologetic. I needed to ensure they acted quickly. Besides, the house will benefit me more than you. How exactly? You don't even like this neighborhood. A calculating look crossed her face. The housing market is hot right now. Once I sell, I can use the capital for my next venture. The room went silent. Even Rachel seemed to realize she'd said too much. You're planning to sell it? I asked incredulously. After all that talk about needing stability? Plans change, she replied dismissively. The important thing is that the property stays in the family until I decide what's best. It's not staying in the family, I pointed out. It's going directly to you, who plans to immediately sell it for profit. Business is business, Rachel said with another shrug. Maybe you should have thought about the financial implications yourself instead of playing house all these years. She sauntered into the kitchen, opening cabinets and drawers. You can leave the appliances, of course. Though I might replace that refrigerator, it looks ancient. I bought that refrigerator last year, I said through gritted teeth. It's a high-efficiency model that saves hundreds in electricity annually. Whatever. Rachel waved her hand dismissively. Oh, and don't bother taking those ugly curtains in the living room. They're going straight to the trash. Those ugly curtains are restoration hardware and cost nearly $1,000, Melissa interjected, her patience clearly evaporating. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Seems like a waste of money to me. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to throw things, to physically remove her from what still felt like my home. The temptation to damage the house out of spite flickered through my mind, to leave water running in the bathrooms, to pour paint on the hardwood floors I'd so carefully refinished, to ensure that if I couldn't have my home, at least she wouldn't get it in perfect condition. But that wasn't who I was. Even in this devastating moment, I wouldn't descend to vandalism or petty revenge. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and looked directly at my sister. I need to continue packing, Rachel. Please leave. I told you, this is my house now. I have every right. You have the legal right to be here, I acknowledged. But if you have any shred of human decency, you'll give me these last few hours of privacy to say goodbye to my home. Something in my tone must have penetrated even Rachel's self-absorption. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded curtly. Fine. But I expect everything cleared out by 7 p.m. tomorrow. After she left, the emotional toll overwhelmed me. I found myself sitting in my bedroom closet, clutching a shoebox of family photos, sobbing uncontrollably. Photos of Rachel and me as children, smiling in matching outfits. Holiday gatherings at my grandmother's house, the very house being taken from me. Pictures of simpler times when I still believed my parents loved us equally. Melissa found me there, gently taking the photos from my trembling hands. I know it feels impossible right now, she said softly, but we'll get through this. One box at a time. By Thursday evening, we had packed everything I could reasonably take: clothes, personal items, important documents, smaller furniture pieces, and cherished possessions. The house looked hollow, echoes bouncing off bare walls where art had hung, empty spaces where furniture had stood. 5 years of life reduced to boxes in friends' garages and a small storage unit Jason had helped me rent. As 7 o'clock approached, I took a final walk through each room, saying goodbye in my own way. In the kitchen where I'd hosted countless dinner parties. The living room where I'd spent winter evenings reading by the fireplace. The backyard garden where perennials I'd planted would bloom without me to see them. In each room, memories flooded back. The day I moved in, the celebrations, the quiet moments that had made this house my sanctuary. I touched door frames, windowsills, walls that had witnessed my life for 5 years. My friends waited respectfully by the door, understanding this final ritual needed to be private. When I finally joined them, tears streaming silently down my face, no one commented. Jason simply handed me a tissue while Melissa squeezed my shoulder in solidarity. At exactly 7, I placed my keys on the kitchen counter and walked out, closing the door on my home for the last time. The finality of that closing door echoed through my body like physical pain, a clean, complete severing from the life I'd built and the family I thought I had. That first night in Melissa's guest room marked the lowest point of my adult life. After everyone left, friends who had spent 2 days helping me pack and move, offering support and outrage on my behalf, the silence was deafening. I lay in an unfamiliar bed, surrounded by hastily packed boxes containing the fragments of my former life, and completely broke down. The tears came in waves, accompanied by physical symptoms I'd never experienced before: chest pain so intense I momentarily feared a heart attack, nausea that left me curled around the toilet, trembling that no amount of blankets could quell. This wasn't just sadness or anger, it was grief in its purest form. I was mourning not only the loss of my home, but the death of my family as I had understood it. Melissa checked on me periodically, offering tea, sitting quietly beside me when words failed. Around 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally pulled me into fitful sleep. The next day, I called my therapist, Dr. Brennan, requesting an emergency session. I'd been seeing her occasionally for years, working through childhood issues and relationship patterns. Never had I needed her expertise more urgently. What you're experiencing is trauma, she explained during our session later that day. The sudden loss of your home, coupled with family betrayal, has triggered a profound grief response. I nodded numbly, tissues crumpled in my hand. But I'm also concerned about the patterns this situation reveals, she continued. This isn't an isolated incident, Sarah. It's the culmination of a lifelong family dynamic. Over the next hour, Dr. Brennan helped me trace the patterns of neglect throughout my childhood, the consistent prioritization of Rachel's needs, the expectation that I would simply adapt to whatever was thrown at me, the praise for my independence that masked parental emotional abandonment. Your self-sufficiency was never truly a choice, she pointed out gently. It was a survival strategy in a family system that didn't provide consistent emotional support. Her words unlocked something inside me, a perspective I'd never fully acknowledged. My independence, my career success, my financial responsibility, all traits I'd taken pride in, were partially responses to knowing, deep down, that I couldn't count on my parents. I had built my life on the foundation of being the strong one, the daughter who didn't need help, because needing help in my family meant being overlooked in favor of Rachel, who had perfected the art of neediness. The following days passed in a blur. I extended my leave from work, grateful for an understanding manager and accumulated personal days. Most mornings, I could barely force myself to shower and eat. Nights brought either insomnia or nightmares where I was locked out of my home while my family laughed from inside. A week after the move, I finally forced myself to assess my financial situation. Sitting at Melissa's dining table, laptop open, I created a spreadsheet documenting every penny I'd invested in what I had believed would one day be my house. The numbers were staggering. 5 years of rent payments, $75,000. Kitchen renovation, $12,500. Bathroom updates, $3,800. Refinished hardwood floors, $2,200. New windows throughout, $4,700. Landscaping and garden, $1,800. Miscellaneous repairs and improvements, $3,200. In total, I had invested over $103,000 in a property that had been abruptly taken from me. The financial loss, on top of the emotional devastation, left me breathless. "This can't be legal," Melissa said, looking over my shoulder at the spreadsheet. "There has to be some recourse." "What recourse?" "I was technically a tenant. The house belonged to my parents, and now it belongs to Rachel. But they led you to believe it would eventually be yours. You have those emails, right? Where your dad said the house would one day be yours." I nodded slowly. "I should have emails going back 5 years. I never delete anything." "Then maybe you should talk to a lawyer." The suggestion seemed extreme, yet what other options remained? That afternoon, I called Daniel, a friend from college who practiced family law. "I can't formally represent you since we have a personal relationship," he explained after hearing my situation, "but I can give you some general guidance and refer you to a colleague who specializes in property disputes." "Is there any legal basis for a claim?" I asked, hope flickering faintly. "Potentially. There's a concept called promissory estoppel that might apply here. Essentially, if someone makes a promise knowing you're likely to rely on it, and you do reasonably rely on it to your detriment, courts may enforce the promise even without a formal contract." The legal terminology was unfamiliar, but the concept resonated. Like my father writing that the house would one day be mine? Exactly. Combined with your history of payments and improvements, there might be a case. It's not guaranteed, but worth exploring. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a spark of something beyond grief, determination, perhaps, or the faintest beginning of hope. Daniel referred me to Catherine Wells, an attorney specializing in family property disputes. While waiting for my consultation with Catherine, I began searching through old emails and documents, building a chronology of my time in the house. I discovered more written evidence than I'd remembered, not just my father's email about fixtures, but multiple messages referring to your future home, long-term planning for your house, and even discussions about eventually transferring the deed when the time is right. Most significantly, I found an email thread from the very beginning of our arrangement where my father had written, "This arrangement makes perfect sense. You'll care for the property properly since it will eventually be yours, and we'll have rental income until we're ready to transfer ownership." My reply had explicitly mentioned, "I'm willing to invest in improvements specifically because I understand this will be my home long term." His response, "Exactly. We all benefit from this arrangement." This documentary evidence strengthened my resolve to fight back. I may have been naive to rely on verbal promises and emails rather than formal legal agreements, but I refused to accept that my parents and sister could simply erase 5 years of my life without consequences. The day before my appointment with Catherine, I received an unexpected call from my Uncle Robert, my father's brother. We weren't particularly close. He lived in Oregon and visited Connecticut rarely, but he had always been kind to both Rachel and me when family gatherings occurred. Sarah, I heard about what happened with the house, he said without preamble. I'm calling because something doesn't add up. What do you mean? I was there when Mom, your grandmother, discussed her will and her wishes for that house. She was very specific about wanting both her granddaughters to benefit from her property. My breath caught. She wanted both Rachel and me to get the house? Not exactly. She discussed either selling the house and splitting the proceeds, or having one granddaughter buy out the other's share. But she was adamant that both of you should benefit equally from that asset. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. Did my parents know this? They were in the room when she said it. Multiple times, over the years before she passed. I'm shocked they would handle things this way. Uncle Robert, would you be willing to put this in writing? Or speak to my attorney? His response was immediate. Absolutely. What they've done isn't right, Sarah. It goes against your grandmother's wishes and basic fairness. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. This wasn't just about my parents choosing Rachel over me yet again. This was about them potentially subverting my grandmother's expressed wishes for her property. The betrayal had deeper roots than I'd imagined. That night, searching through more old emails, I made another discovery. In a folder of documents my grandmother had sent me years before her death, I found a scanned letter addressed to both Rachel and me. It was dated 3 years before her passing and expressed her hopes for her estate. My dear granddaughters, when I'm gone, I want you both to benefit equally from what I leave behind. The house on Maple Street holds special memories for our family, and my wish is for it to benefit both of you, either through shared ownership or fair division of its value. Whatever arrangements your parents make as the executors of my estate, know that my intention is for both my granddaughters to receive equal shares of this family legacy. I printed the letter with hands that trembled not from grief, but from rising anger. Tomorrow's meeting with Catherine Wells suddenly held far more significance. This wasn't just about seeking compensation for my losses. This was about justice for me and for my grandmother's thwarted wishes. Catherine Wells' office exuded competence and stability, qualities I desperately needed in my life. The attorney herself, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed my documentation with growing interest. Ms. Mitchell, based on what you've shown me, you have a viable case, she said, looking up from my grandmother's letter. Multiple elements support a claim. The email correspondence establishing an understanding that you would eventually own the property, your substantial financial investment based on that understanding, and now this letter indicating your grandmother's wishes for equal distribution. So I can get the house back? Hope surged through me. Catherine tempered my expectations. Legal remedies aren't always that straightforward. The property has already been transferred to your sister, which complicates matters. However, we could pursue compensation for your investments plus damages for the broken promise. Alternatively, we could seek enforcement of your grandmother's wishes for equal distribution, which might mean your sister would need to buy out your half-interest at fair market value. What's our first step? I'll draft a demand letter outlining our claims and proposed remedies. We'll send this to your parents and sister before filing any formal lawsuit. Often, these matters can be resolved without court intervention once all parties understand the legal consequences they're facing. The following week passed in a blur of legal preparations. Catherine worked with me to compile all relevant documentation, financial records of rent payments and home improvements, email correspondence with my parents, my grandmother's letter, and a written statement from Uncle Robert confirming my grandmother's expressed wishes. When the demand letter was ready, Catherine explained its contents. We were seeking either restoration of my half-interest in the property, based on my grandmother's expressed intent, or financial compensation totaling $175,000, representing my rent payments, property improvements, and additional damages for emotional distress and breach of promise. This amount may seem high, Catherine noted, but it's strategically appropriate. It gives us room to negotiate while ensuring you receive fair compensation for your losses. The letter was sent via certified mail to both my parents and Rachel. Then came the waiting, tense days where I fluctuated between anxiety, vindication, and lingering grief. The first response came from Rachel, in the form of a barrage of angry text messages. How dare you sic a lawyer on your own family? Mom and Dad are devastated by your betrayal. You've always been jealous of me, but this is a new low. I hope that money is worth destroying your family over. I didn't respond to any of them, instead forwarding the messages to Catherine as evidence of Rachel's attitude. My parents' reaction came more formally. A terse email from my father stating they had received the letter and were consulting with appropriate advisors. What I hadn't anticipated was the ripple effect through our extended family. Word spread quickly about both the original situation and my legal response. Family members began taking sides. My mother's sister called to berate me for attacking my own parents over money. In contrast, my cousin Jen, always close to my grandmother, expressed full support for my actions, writing, "Grandma would be heartbroken by what they did. I'm glad you're standing up for yourself and for her wishes." The most unexpected support came from my colleague Trevor, who had helped with the moving process. During a quick lunch catch-up, he mentioned that his brother worked for a local news station. "Your story raises important issues about family property disputes and elder wishes," he suggested. "If the legal process stalls, media attention might help. Just something to keep in your back pocket." I thanked him but hoped such measures wouldn't be necessary. Despite everything, I didn't want to publicly humiliate my family. I simply wanted justice and recognition of the wrong that had been done. 3 weeks after the demand letter, Catherine received a response from my parents' attorney, a standard defense claiming there was no legally binding promise regarding the house, that I had been a tenant with no reasonable expectation of ownership, and that my parents had full legal right to transfer their property as they saw fit. "This is expected posturing," Catherine assured me. "They're establishing their initial position before negotiations begin." What wasn't expected was the impact the situation had on my professional life. Despite the personal turmoil, I had returned to work, finding solace in the structure and predictability of accounting. My focus and dedication actually increased. Work became the one area where I felt confident and in control when everything else was chaos. This dedication didn't go unnoticed. 2 months into the legal process, my manager called me into her office. "Sarah, the partners have been impressed with your performance, particularly given the personal challenges we know you've been facing. We'd like to offer you an early promotion to senior manager." The recognition and substantial salary increase couldn't have come at a better time. It not only boosted my financial security during this uncertain period, but also reinforced my self-worth when it had been so severely undermined by my family's actions. With newfound confidence and improving finances, I began apartment hunting, eventually finding a perfect 2-bedroom condo in a historic building downtown. The property even offered a rent-to-own option that would allow me to apply a portion of my monthly payments toward an eventual purchase. This is actually a better financial arrangement than I had with my parents, I realized during a therapy session. I'll be building equity from day one, with everything in writing and legally protected. Dr. Brennan nodded. "It's interesting how this crisis has pushed you toward arrangements that better protect your interests. There's growth happening amid the pain." Meanwhile, the legal process continued. After initial depositions where my parents and Rachel were questioned under oath about their understanding of our arrangement and my grandmother's wishes, cracks began appearing in their united front. My father, confronted with his own emails promising me the house one day, became defensive and evasive. Rachel, when questioned about her claim that I had been researching adverse possession laws, admitted she had heard about it from someone but couldn't specify who. My mother, faced with Uncle Robert's testimony about my grandmother's wishes, appeared genuinely distressed, suggesting she might not have fully understood the implications of their actions. For months into the legal battle, Catherine called with unexpected news. "Your parents have requested a settlement conference," she said. "This suggests they're becoming uncomfortable with how this might play out in court." The settlement conference was scheduled for the following week at Catherine's office. As the date approached, my anxiety peaked. I would be facing my family across a conference table for the first time since discovering their betrayal. How would I react? Could I maintain my composure? Would seeing them reopen wounds that had just begun to heal? The night before the conference, Uncle Robert called with information that dramatically shifted the dynamic. "Sarah, I was going through some of your grandmother's old papers that I kept, and I found something important. It's a letter from her attorney confirming her wishes regarding the house. It specifically states that while the property would go to your parents initially, it was with the understanding that it would ultimately benefit both granddaughters equally. That's exactly what we need, I breathed. Can you send it immediately? Already scanned and emailed to you and your attorney. This document, arriving at the 11th hour, provided the strongest evidence yet that my parents had acted against not just moral obligations, but potentially legal ones as well. Catherine immediately incorporated it into our settlement strategy. The next morning, I walked into Catherine's conference room with my head held high, the document secure in our arsenal. My parents and Rachel sat on one side of the table, their attorney between them. Catherine and I took our places opposite them. The tension was palpable. My father wouldn't meet my eyes, my mother looked tearful, and Rachel maintained a defensive posture, arms crossed tightly over her chest. After opening formalities, Catherine presented our case methodically, the emails, the financial records, the testimonies, and finally, the newly discovered letter from my grandmother's attorney. With each piece of evidence, my parents seemed to sink further into their chairs. When she finished, my parents' attorney requested a private consultation with his clients. They left the room for nearly 30 minutes. When they returned, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Their attorney cleared his throat. My clients would like to propose a settlement. The settlement conference room felt smaller as we reconvened after their private discussion. My parents looked diminished somehow, my father's usual commanding presence replaced by a slumped posture, my mother's eyes red-rimmed from crying. Rachel alone maintained her defiance, though even she seemed subdued by the weight of evidence against their position. Their attorney spoke first. After reviewing the additional documentation, my clients recognized there may have been misunderstandings regarding the property. They propose a financial settlement of $80,000 to compensate Ms. Mitchell for her investments in the house, with the understanding that this concludes all claims. Catherine shook her head immediately. That amount doesn't approach adequate compensation for our clients' losses, both financial and emotional. We've documented over $103,000 in direct financial investment, not including the market value of half the property that should rightfully be hers according to her grandmother's expressed wishes. As the attorneys negotiated figures, I watched my family across the table. My father stared at his hands, my mother occasionally dabbed at her eyes, and Rachel, most surprisingly, began to show signs of cracking under pressure. "This is ridiculous," she suddenly burst out. "Sarah's just doing this for revenge." Rachel, her attorney cautioned, but she continued. "You all need to understand what really happened," she insisted, her voice rising. "I told Mom and Dad that Sarah was planning to claim the house through some legal loophole. I said we needed to act fast to protect our family property." The room fell silent. My father looked up sharply. "Rachel, that's enough." "No, it's not." Rachel's composure collapsed entirely. "I needed that house. My career was failing, I had nothing to show for the last 10 years, while Sarah had everything: stability, respect, a successful career. That house was my only chance to have something valuable, something I could leverage for a fresh start." By leveraging a property that was meant to benefit both of you equally, Catherine interjected calmly, and by fabricating claims about my client's intentions. Rachel's face crumpled. "I didn't think it would go this far. I just needed something to go my way for once." My mother reached for Rachel's hand, but her expression had changed. The blindly supportive mother was gone, replaced by someone beginning to recognize the manipulation she'd enabled. After a brief recess to allow everyone to regain composure, negotiations resumed with a markedly different tone. By late afternoon, we reached a settlement that vindicated my position on nearly every front. Full reimbursement for all rent paid over 5 years, $75,000. Compensation for all documented home improvements, $28,500. Additional damages for emotional distress and displacement, $50,000. A formal acknowledgement that my grandmother's wishes for equal distribution had not been honored. 6 months of free storage for my belongings that had been hastily relocated. The total settlement came to $153,500, a life-changing amount that would give me a fresh start on my own terms. As the attorneys finalized the paperwork, My father finally spoke directly to me. Sarah, He began, then faltered. We made a terrible mistake. I met his gaze steadily. Yes, you did. Is there any way we can begin to repair our relationship? The question hung in the air between us. 6 months ago, I might have immediately agreed, so desperate for their approval that I would have forgiven anything. Now, I understood my worth differently. That depends, I replied carefully. On whether you're truly ready to see me as an equal to Rachel. On whether you recognize the pattern of favoritism that's defined our family dynamic my entire life. On whether you're willing to respect boundaries I need to establish going forward. He nodded slowly, the reality of our damaged relationship finally registering. I understand. Whatever you need. My mother reached across the table tentatively. We never meant to hurt you, Sarah. We got so caught up in Rachel's needs that we failed to see what we were doing to you. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said, the phrase borrowed from Dr. Brennan. I need time. The settlement was signed that afternoon. Walking out of Catherine's office, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of betrayal hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something I could carry, a hard-won lesson rather than a crushing burden. The irony of Rachel's situation emerged in the following months. Having obtained the house through manipulation, she found herself unable to maintain it properly. Without my practical skills and financial management, the property quickly became a burden rather than an asset. Within 8 months, she listed it for sale, ultimately accepting an offer significantly below market value due to deferred maintenance and her eagerness to unload the responsibility. Meanwhile, I used my settlement money to make a substantial down payment on my dream condo, a beautiful 2-bedroom in a historic building with high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and, most importantly, my name alone on the deed. The remaining funds went into investments and a small emergency fund, creating the security I had always sought. My relationship with my parents entered a period of careful reconstruction. I established clear boundaries, no unannounced visits, no financial entanglements, and most importantly, no tolerance for unequal treatment between Rachel and me. We began with occasional phone calls, gradually working up to monthly dinners where we slowly, painfully rebuilt trust. I never realized how much we favored Rachel until I saw it all laid out during the legal process, my mother admitted during one of these dinners. Looking back, it's so obvious, but we just couldn't see it then. Recognizing it is the first step, I replied, neither absolving nor condemning them. Changing it consistently will take time. Rachel and I maintained a more distant relationship. Her initial anger over the settlement eventually gave way to grudging acknowledgement that she had engineered her own downfall through manipulation. When she approached me a year later for a loan to fund another business venture, I declined politely but firmly. I wish you success, Rachel, but our financial lives need to remain separate. The hurt flashed across her face briefly, but she nodded. I understand. I wouldn't trust me either. The most profound transformations, however, occurred within me. Through continued therapy with Dr. Brennan, I recognized how the family dynamics had shaped my relationships and self-perception. I had built my identity around being the reliable, independent daughter who needed nothing, a defense mechanism against the pain of being overlooked. You don't have to earn love through self-sufficiency, Dr. Brennan reminded me regularly. Needing support isn't weakness, it's human connection. Gradually, I allowed myself greater vulnerability with friends like Melissa and Jason, who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. I began dating again, approaching relationships with clearer boundaries and expectations. When I met Michael, a landscape architect with his own painful family history, our shared experiences of healing created a foundation of genuine understanding. 2 years after the settlement, standing in my condo that had truly become home, I realized how completely my life had transformed. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy me had instead forced me to rebuild on stronger foundations, legally, financially, emotionally, and relationally. The family I was born into had failed me in profound ways, but the family I chose, friends who showed up with moving boxes and unwavering support, colleagues who recognized my value, a partner who understood boundaries and respect, had shown me what genuine care looked like. I sometimes wonder what my grandmother would think of how everything unfolded. I like to believe she would approve of my standing up for myself, of insisting that her wishes for equitable treatment be acknowledged, of creating a home and life that were truly mine. The most important lesson from this painful journey wasn't about property or money, but about recognizing my inherent worth, independent of what my family could give or take from me. When my parents ordered me out with 48 hours notice, they thought they were simply transferring a house. Instead, they inadvertently set in motion a transformation that led me to claim not just financial compensation, but the self-respect I had deserved all along. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who treated you unfairly? Or discovered your own strength through a painful betrayal? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories of overcoming family challenges. Remember that recognizing your worth is the first step toward creating the life you deserve. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives strength to anyone facing similar struggles with family dynamics.